I'm your host, Carolyn Solo, LCSW, EMDR therapist, and mom of 3 daughters. Thank you for joining me.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 105 of the Future Template Parent podcast. I am your host, Dr. Carolyn Solo, LCSW, PhD, EMDR consultant, mom of 3 daughters, and business coach for EMDR therapists. So today I want to talk about something that I have been hearing from coaching clients, and I have heard before, and I continue to hear. What if clients don't get the outcome in their intensive that I am promising? What if they don't get a transformational experience, right? I make the claim in my marketing of my intensives that clients make at least 6 months of progress in a 15-hour intensive, and often a lot more than that. And that has been proven to be true many times over. I mean, that's hard to measure, but like clients see movement on things that they've been working on in therapy for a really long time. So maybe even more progress than they might in a year or 6 months. So, but that's a lofty claim. And this is sort of what I teach to therapists in my group program and in my one-to-one coaching. And this issue came up a few times in the first couple meetings of the current cohort of my program. This idea of what if people don't get this outcome, because I'm telling my therapists who are working with me, like, you can sell that outcome. That can be what you tell people. And so I want to talk a little bit about why therapists worry about this, why it's inaccurate, and how to talk to clients about it. So I think the therapists think this, first of all, because of imposter syndrome and self-doubt. They don't believe that they can deliver a transformation. Like, they think, oh, maybe other therapists who are more skilled than I am would be able to do this, but I can't do it. I'm not a good enough EMDR therapist. Maybe I'm not certified yet, or I haven't done intensives for long enough, or what if I don't know what to do with the time and my clients don't get a good outcome? That's one thing I think is behind it for people. And, one of the things I'll say, I'm going to go into some of these stuff in more detail a little bit further on in the episode, but the only way you're going to get better at doing intensives is by doing them. So, and your clients don't have any idea what, is possible or not possible, right? They know that EMDR, they know that they're coming for a really, concentrated chunk of time and a lot's going to happen. And they bring as much to the work as you do, right? It's a dynamic. So there's that too. So it's one of those things where you kind of have to lean into that imposter syndrome, because imposter syndrome, is something that can often make us try harder, be better. And that's not a bad thing as long as you're not, abusing yourself unnecessarily, right? Verbally. So there's, fears of the imposter syndrome thing. Like, maybe I should just take 50 more trainings and then I'll feel better. Well, maybe not. Maybe it's about leaning into that fear, trying it, seeing what happens, and using that to propel you forward. That's actually accurate data. When we haven't done this yet and we're just wondering, there's no data to go on, right? So that's not coming from anything that's grounded in reality, right? So it's most likely kind of that imposter syndrome. Fears about marketing. I think therapists are worried about making this claim and then doing it publicly, whether on social media or on their Instagram. That's social media, on their webpage, or if they're on a podcast, or who knows, writing a blog post, anywhere that they could make this claim, or talking to other therapists about it. In my marketing, what if this is what I say and it's not true, right? They don't want to be called out. As on social media, people are terrified of being called out, right? And look, an Instagram reel or a carousel is not the place where you're going to provide a lot of nuance around this like complicated topic, right? A reel is like 90 seconds, whatever, however long they can be now. You're going to make a big claim with very little nuance because of the timing, right? On your webpage, you're trying to, give information, and you can give more information than you can on a social media post, but you're not going to give every single possible nuance because you can't, because human beings are complex. Um, you know, if someone calls you out, which, could happen, but happens much less often than than just people not saying anything at all or saying something positive, then yeah, you may have to deal with that. And I think that's a feature of marketing, is that sometimes we may have to push back against the negative feedback, but that's not the end of the world. And it's a blip in most people's, you know, like knowledge of you, if they even notice that that happened at all, right? So I think you just, it's impossible to provide all the nuance behind, claiming that the client's going to get a year's worth of progress or 6 months worth of progress in 1 week. And that's not an unfounded claim. And if you listen to other episodes I recorded, I talk a lot about like, why do I think that you can get that amount of progress in that short of a time? There are many reasons why, but like, go back and listen to some of those episodes if you're interested. But that claim is not pulling it out of the air. It's based on my own experience. It's based on the experience of other therapists I've worked with. So it's not coming out of nowhere. If you're following a treatment plan and following a structure like the structure I teach in my coaching, both group and individual, you're going to get good results. And having that structure can be really grounding and supportive for when you're like entering into the intensive. So those are a couple things. And then ethics. I think there's this idea of being ethical that actually trips us up a lot of the time in a variety of ways. Good therapists, which, I know all of you are, really believe in being ethical and transparent, right? Of course, there's some therapists out there who are not ethical, and that is horrible. And they, do a disservice to all of us and to their clients, most of all their clients, and do harm. But, that's not the majority of us. I think that most of us spend so much time examining the many decisions we have to make in our practice out of fear that they're not ethical. Like even, people get called unethical for charging $150 an hour for a session, and not being accessible to everyone, not to mention $400 an hour for an intensive, right? So you could still get called unethical even if you're charging a much lower rate, right? Their therapists get called unethical because they might not specialize in working with certain clients and they're called elitist, or like they only want to work with the worried well, or I'm sure you've heard all this stuff, right? And those claims of, what it means to be unethical do come often from a good place of this rhetoric that we're taught in grad school, that we're supposed to serve people, but none of us can serve everyone. And serving people at the expense of our own well-being is just, it's not it. That's not changing any system. That's harming us and harming clients, I think. Right. So we can get caught in decision fatigue around this idea of what's ethical. And I think people is it ethical to talk about a big transformation if I can't guarantee it? And am I actually an unethical therapist if I say that I can do this, even if there's no guarantee? Look, there's no guarantees of anything, of any therapeutic experience, right? You have clients come in and hourly clients, and maybe after 6 months, you refer them out because it's not working. So should you give them all their money back? Because no, of course not. And like you have documentation that clients sign that protects you from that. And in a lot of those cases, the client has still gotten benefit from their work with you, even if, they're still experiencing anxiety, even if there's another therapist who might be a better fit for them. It doesn't mean the work you did has no value, right? We know that. So, why is this more unethical than saying that therapy can create a transformation for someone, right? I think there's fears about the fee, of course, that they're afraid to say that I can give this outcome and it costs this much money. It's a very high rate. I better deliver, right? And that feels like a lot of pressure, and again, like, you're going to give it your absolute best. If you work with me, I'm going to give you a lot of tools to create a wonderful, like really thorough and comprehensive, intensive experience for a client. But, the fears about the fee are going to come from your own stuff too. There are people out here charging this amount of money, I promise you. And something that we talk about in my coaching programs is I give lots of examples of this person in this state is doing this person here is doing that. I just heard about someone in Washington, D.C. who charges between $8K and $10K for an intensive, $8K for 3 days, $10K for 4 days. You know, like people are out here doing this. So why can't you be one of them? Why can't you do really, really incredibly transformational, powerful work, charge a lot of money for it, right? And if you're armed with like a real arsenal of skills and a structure for the intensive, you're going to feel much more confident walking in there having charged this high fee, right? So why are these fears inaccurate? Well, I've been addressing this some of it, but I will tell you that like I've never had a client complete an intensive and be like, well, that sucked. Give me my money back. I've had notable results of some kind every time. And of course, it's impossible to fully predict outcomes before the intensive, right? We do our best clinical assessment, you know, as the intensive begins to unfold. We assess things in like the consultation as much as we can, in the 90-minute intake as much as we can. We're doing our best. Like the 6 months to a year is kind of like the general average for what I see, which is why that's what I tell people. I can't guarantee anything for anyone, right? And why would I? Every human being is different, right? You know, so we do our best, but this is a reasonable transformation that you can tell people they can expect. Something that you can do when you're feeling this also is remind yourself of the non-intensive clients that you've done great work with. Okay, I know you have some, and I hope there's a few that you kind of have in your back pocket to ground yourself, you know, when you have that difficult session, when you start to doubt yourself. It's really, really easy to get fixated on those couple of clients that maybe you didn't get the greatest outcome with and be like, well, that's proof that I'm a bad therapist. It's very likely that there was a lot happening in that dynamic that impacted the outcome, right? Therapy is a relational process. And we all know how much can get activated by a therapeutic relationship, both for the therapist and the client. There's so many things at play there. And the answer is not, it's because I'm a bad therapist, right? And, you know, and I think like that's one of the reasons that a lot of therapists, business coaches, and I think for good reason, talk about niching down, because partly you want to be working with clients that you do good work with. And that's, you know, defining your niche is gonna help you in that. And even still within your niche, there are going to be people for whatever reason that are not a fit. That's okay. But how many more clients have you worked with that have made great progress? That's much more indicative of your ability as a therapist. And please give that attention, not like, well, you know, so-and-so left after 3 sessions because she said it wasn't helping. Okay, we all have those experiences. I'm sure like the best, whatever it means to be the best therapist in the world, whoever, Esther Perel, whatever, has had clients say this isn't helping and leave. I'm sure, you know? So like that's just the reality of relational therapy. So focus on those people that you know you've made great progress with. So how do you talk to clients about this transformation in a way that feels ethical, right? Again, I give you scripts for this in my coaching, but just in general, obviously you're not going to make promises, right? You're not going to say, this is exactly what's going to happen. You're going to say, this is generally what I see. You know, this is what I'm hoping we can work towards. But, you know, every individual is unique and we going to kind of see how it goes. But I have a structure and I have a framework that tends to work pretty well. And then you kind of leave it at that. That's plenty, you know. Make sure you're doing a thorough phase 1 and 2 in the intensive. And that's my workbook that if you don't have it already, there's a link in the show notes where you can download it. It's a free 21-page client workbook that helps prepare the client for an intensive. It really, really helps with giving them clarity, giving you clarity, so you have an excellent treatment plan, which of course is going to make a difference in what you can get done. And it sort of helps with the structure of the intensive too. And then again, like I said, I teach the structure, the RTEP structure that I use with my intensive clients. So you can have that as well. And I have earlier episodes where I talk about that. And certainly, of course, to protect yourself and to protect your clients, you need to have a statement in your paperwork that says that you don't promise specific outcomes and that positive outcomes are dependent on completion of the recommended treatment plan. Okay. In my coaching programs, I provide everyone with I work with a agreement to engage in intensive that you can use. It's just an additional piece of paperwork that you have clients sign. And it includes language about like expectations and no guarantees and stuff like that. I've never had this be challenged, by the way. Okay. Never had this be challenged. And this is true for any medical procedure, right? I could get a crown and a root canal and a cavity could still come back. And I have to get the tooth removed and I have to get an implant. I say this because it's happened to me, okay? And I'm not going to get my money back, am I, for that crown? There's a variety of reasons why that could happen and there's no guarantees, right? And just in general, I've never had a single person ask for their money back. And I've never had anyone, except for one person, I'll talk about it in a second, say that that was a terrible experience. The guy gave me nothing, right? So what happened with this person? I think I've probably talked about this before. He was a younger guy, a college freshman. Something in high school, this person had done something that was pretty bad. I don't want to go, obviously I'm going to protect this client's confidentiality, but and they really weren't ready to acknowledge the impact of it. They were experiencing a lot of dissociation and the dissociation, it was very clear to me, was sort of like separating them from their guilt and shame about this thing that had happened. But they refused to acknowledge that that was true and did not want to process any of that. So they had these very, very defensive parts that were like, we're not ready to go. This kid was 19. Like we all, I'm not excusing what happened, but also they were a child when they did this and et cetera, right? They weren't ready to acknowledge this. They wanted to get rid of the symptoms, but they were not willing to do the work that it would actually take to deal with the symptoms, okay? And that person said, oh, it didn't work at all. And I'm not even sure that's true. I'm sure that there were defensive parts of them that felt like they had to say that, right? And again, this is a kid. So that is the one experience in which someone said an intensive was not helpful. Okay. And again, I'm not sure it wasn't helpful. I think I planted some seeds that I hope over time could kind of germinate with this person and they could think like, yeah, maybe I do need to think a little bit differently about this. Right. No one's ever asked for their money back. Probably partly because I have very clear paperwork policies that I make sure I go over with clients. Like really twice, I will point out through like kind of once when I have them, when I go through the paperwork with them before they, when I send all the information to them prior. And then at the beginning of the intensive as well, I will go over like important pieces of paperwork, like payment plans and, all that sorts of things, just so I'm sure that they know and that I know. Right. And so that, and also because they get good results. So, I think that because I have a structure that I'm very confident in and the skills that I use are very, really stand up to the work and provide good results, like I am confident. And, the more intensives you do and the more good results you get, like the more and more confident you're going to feel about making those claims. So, and you got to start somewhere. Your first intensive is not going to be your best intensive, but it's still going to be pretty damn good, especially if you're following, the protocols that I think work really well. So yeah, I just wanted to share some thoughts on that just because I've been hearing it come up a lot. It came up in my group a couple of times. I've heard other coaching clients talk about it. And, I think it really comes from that place of you want to do good work. Of course you do. And you want to be ethical. Of course you do. And I promise you, making claims like this is ethical and it is accurate. This is something that you can deliver on. I firmly believe that. So just want to give you a little, a little boost of confidence if you need it. And if you do want to download the workbook that I talk about that helps prepare clients for an intensive, again, the link is in the show notes, my 21-page client intensive workbook. And I have some previous episodes about it as well if you want to know more about that. So thank you so much for joining me for episode 105 of the Future Template Parent podcast. Oh my gosh, I've gotten so many downloads the past week, which is amazing. That means lots of people are discovering the podcast. So that's really exciting. So thank you everyone for listening and hello to the people who have just found the podcast. So excited to have you and to have you joining us in this, movement to kind of revolutionize how we offer therapy. Take care, everyone, and have a wonderful week.